We are continuing on, as Jeff said, with our I Am series. Ooh, I don't know if you can see that, I can't. But we are continuing on with the I Am series, looking at John, the Gospel, and looking to see what the I Am statements are. There are 7 of them, and so far we've covered the light of the world. I am the light of the world. Jesus says, I'm the light of the world. Go into the darkness, shine the light there. He says He's the resurrection and the life, raising Lazarus from the dead. He gives the life. There's no death for those who believe in Him. He's the way, the truth, and the life. The way to the Father is through Him. The truth and the life, again, hitting on the life being eternal. And then we got into the maybe, Bueller. The true vine, and we talked about that last week. Jesus saying, I am the true vine, and that we are the branches. And if we want to be connected to God, it's through a relationship with Jesus. Hitting again on the same themes and topics of I am the way. And today we're going to jump to John chapter 10. So if you want to flip in your Bibles to John chapter 10, that's where we'll begin today. We're going to jump around a little bit and come back to John 10 eventually. But John chapter 10 is where we will start, with the first 10 verses of the chapter. And they read as follows. Very truly I tell you, Pharisees, anyone who does not enter the sheep pen by the gate but climbs in by some other way is a thief and a robber. The one who enters by the gate is the shepherd of the sheep. The gatekeeper opens the gate for him, and the sheep listen to his voice. He calls his own sheep by name and leads them out. When he has brought all of his own, he goes on ahead of them, and his sheep follow him because they know his voice. But they will never follow a stranger. In fact, they will run away from him because they do not recognize a stranger's voice. Jesus used this figure of speech, but the Pharisees did not understand what he was telling them. Therefore, Jesus said, very truly I tell you, I am the gate for the sheep. All who have come before me are thieves and robbers, but the sheep have not listened to them. I am the gate. Whoever enters through me will be saved. They will come in and go out and find pasture. The thief comes only to steal and kill and destroy. I have come that they may have life and have it to the full. Jesus says, I am the gate. If my clicker would work, it would pop up. Oh, there we go. I think batteries are dying out on that guy. Jesus says, I am the gate. Last week, we talked about it a few minutes ago with the kids, the pig penning. If you were there, you saw what I saw probably. But one thing I kind of caught on to was that when they would let the pigs out of the pen, where the rest of the pigs were, all those other pigs would immediately turn around and try to get back in there. They would try to get in with the rest of the pigs, where there was comfort, where there was safety, they thought. Right? Some of them would try to dig their way under. Some of them would just be headbutting the pen or the gate. But that's what they wanted to be, where there was safety of numbers. But that's not where they were. The gate was the threshold to safety. On one side were children who were going to chase them and they were terrified. On the other side were 50 other pigs where they thought they could be safe. And so they wanted to be there where they could be safe. That's the mental image I immediately got whenever I heard I am the gate this week. And so it was familiar. Just a thing though, the shepherds that Jesus is talking about, they didn't have established pens necessarily like we had at the fair. They didn't have established pens that most of us have if we have livestock. They would use whatever they could. Some of them would have pens. But when Jesus is saying that the shepherd is the gate and that he is the gate, what he's referring to is that it would be common for a shepherd to gather his sheep into a cave at night, and he would sit watch at the front of the cave, being the gate, not letting anything into the cave. He would gather his sheep between a fence made of sticks and limbs and a rock wall or something, and he would stay there at the gate, letting those in that can come in and those not in. The shepherd literally was the gate that kept the sheep together and kept the thieves and those who come to destroy, as Jesus has called them, out. The shepherd would sleep at the entrance. The shepherd would protect his flock. The gate is the threshold. The gate is the threshold that gives freedom. right? It gives safety. Crossing over the gate allows for safety. On this side of the gate is the unknown. And so Jesus saying, I am the gate, is saying, I am the way to this freedom. I am the way to this safety. It's an entry door to salvation and an exit point from the unknown, from the scary things out there, from fear. In John 5, just real quick, I'm going to jump there. You can as well if you would like. John 5, we'll be back to John 10 in a minute. But John 5, we got a healing that goes along with this. Each of these I am statements have a miracle that kind of are used as a sign to point to that I am statement. And today's sign is found in 5, verses 2 through 8. There's a paralytic man. Now there is in Jerusalem near the sheep gate, which is just, I think, a convenient coincidence for the simile. But there's a pool near the sheep gate, which in Aramaic is called Bethsaida, and which is surrounded by 5 covered colonnades. Here a great number of disabled people used to lie: the blind, the lame, the paralyzed. One who was there had been an invalid for 38 years. When Jesus saw him laying there and learned that he had been in this condition for a long time, he asked him, "Do you want to get well?" "Sir," the invalid replied, "I have no one to help me into the pool when the water is stirred. While I am trying to get in, someone else goes down ahead of me." Then Jesus said to him, "Get up, pick up your mat, and walk." At once the man was cured. He picked up his mat and walked. The day on which this took place was the Sabbath. First, I'd just like to state that I'm too sarcastic to answer Jesus' questions sometimes, The guy laying there on the mat as an invalid, and Jesus says, "Do you want to get better?" And I would have gave some sarcastic response, and Jesus would have just laughed at me and walked on or something. But what happens here is that this man, every day, for 38 years, he's laying here by this pool, it says. It doesn't necessarily say that, but he's been invalid for 38 years, so we can assume he's been trying to get better for all those 38 years. He comes to this pool. He just wants to get into the water where he will be healed. He wants to get in the water. And Jesus shows up and he heals him. The water isn't what heals the man. Jesus is. The water isn't the gate to freedom. Freedom from sin, freedom from shame, freedom from his pain, freedom from relying on the others. That's not the pool. What gives him that freedom is Jesus. Jesus gives him freedom from having to rely on others. He gives him freedom from the shame of having to lie there and not be able to help himself. He gives him freedom from his pain, freedom from his suffering. The pool does not lead to this. It is Jesus. Jesus is the gate. He is that gate to safety. There's no magic water. There's no nice fancy words we can say. Simply, it's just the fact that Jesus, out of the grace, gives him this salvation, gives him this freedom. No more pain, no more suffering for this man, because he has met and encountered Jesus Christ. Flipping back to John 10, if Jesus is the good gate, we're going to continue on in the story because Jesus continues on. He doesn't stop there. He says, "Since I am the good gate," in verse 11, "I am also," he says, "I am the good shepherd. The good shepherd lays down his life." The good shepherd lays down his life for his sheep. The hired hand is not the shepherd and does not own the sheep. So when he sees the wolf coming, he abandons the sheep and runs away. Lost my spot there, I apologize. And runs away. The man runs away because he is a hired hand and cares nothing for the sheep. I am the good shepherd. I know my sheep, and my sheep know me. Just as the Father knows me, and I know the Father, and I lay down my life for the sheep, I have other sheep that are not of this sheep pen. I must bring them also. They too will listen to my voice, and there shall be one flock and one shepherd. The reason my Father loves me is this, that I lay down my life only to take it up again. No one takes it from me, but I lay it down on my own accord. I have authority to lay it down and authority to take it up again. This command I received from my Father. Jesus is ultimately, he's the good shepherd ultimately. He's the gate. He's the example of what a shepherd should be for sheep, and He is that for Christians in the world. He is the gate that leads to the salvation. He is the gate that leads to freedom and to safety. Gate that ultimately leads away from sin, ultimately leads away from darkness, leads us into the light. Jesus does one better, though, than laying down His life. Right? He doesn't just lay down to sleep at the gate. He lays down His life for His sheep. He lays His life down that people may step across to safety and grab hold of salvation. The only way for the sheep to step into safety is to hear the voice of the Good Shepherd. In that chapter 10, we've read it a couple times that the shepherd calls out for his sheep, and the sheep hear his voice and come to him. And they come to safety because they recognize his voice. Said if they heard an imposter hollering for them, they wouldn't come. They would instead run away because they know the voice of their shepherd. In John 6, there's the story of Jesus walking on the water. And it says that Jesus sent His disciples out, and they got 3.5 miles out into the water. And then it was past midnight, and Jesus comes walking on the water to them, and they just see this figure out on the water walking towards them. And understandably, the verse says they were terrified. It says they were terrified because there's this creature, this man-like being walking right towards them, walking on the water. But then Jesus calls out to them and says, "Do not be afraid, it is I." And the next verse says the disciples welcomed Him on the boat because they heard His voice. Jesus' sheep, the disciples, knew the Good Shepherd's voice. Growing up, it might be hard to tell, you might not know it, but growing up, especially when I was younger, I was kind of like a really goody two-shoes, and I was probably the annoying kid who tattled on my brother all the time or my sister. That was just, I don't know, it was my personality. Eventually, I got out of it, and my mom probably wished I'd go back to it at some times whenever we were in high school. But that was me. And so if there were rules in school, I followed them. I didn't mess up. I behaved. I was terrified to mess up. And so one day, I was in second grade. I remember the story still, but I was in second grade, and we were walking in, maybe from the library or from recess. We were walking back to our classroom. And I hear somebody whisper behind me, "Holton, hey Holton." And I'm like, we're not supposed to talk in the hallway. So I didn't even look. I was like, I'm not going to look and give the appearance that I am talking in the hallway. No way. So I keep walking. And then again, "Holton, hey Holton." And I'm just like ignoring him. And finally, after about the 5th time of somebody whispering at me, somebody finally said, "Holton, it's your mother. Look at me." It was my mom. Me being the straight-laced kid I was, I didn't want to get in trouble. I didn't want to give off the appearance to Mrs. Staley that I was talking to someone else. So I focused straight ahead. Single file line. Meanwhile, my mother's trying to get my attention. I don't remember what she was there for that day, but she was trying to talk in the hallway, truly. She wasn't needing me for anything. She just wanted to talk. And, I probably said, "Woman, not right now." But I didn't recognize her voice. She said my name multiple times. Maybe it's because she was whispering. I didn't recognize her voice. One time when I was at college, I don't know that I've shared this with many people, but I was at Bethel, and my first semester at Bethel, I came home every weekend. I didn't make any friends that semester. I came home every weekend. My second semester, I came home about 3 times the whole semester. The next year, I just, each semester it got less and less. And there was one semester where I hadn't talked. I'm not good at talking on the phone. I'm really good at seeing people once a year and picking up the relationship right where I left it. And so I hadn't talked to my parents for 2 or 3 weeks. Hadn't been home for a couple weeks. Not even on the phone have I talked to them. Maybe a text message. And I was at Bethel. And I just realized, I couldn't picture my mom's face. I couldn't hear her voice. I just couldn't remember it. And so on a Saturday afternoon, like a lost puppy dog, I just drove home because I couldn't remember what my mom's voice sounded like. I couldn't remember even what she looked like. It was kind of sad. And I came home because I wanted to hear her voice. A voice can send you right back. For the longest time after my grandmother passed away when I was in high school, I saved a voicemail on my phone forever just because it had her voice on it. A voice can take you right back to your childhood, a song, just like that. And so there's a power in the voice. And so today, we're not really talking about, do you hear God's voice and obey Him? Do you do what God's telling you? I'm just asking, do you hear God's voice? We live busy lives, and there's a humming, and that's really distracting me today from hearing God's voice. I'm going to have to work on this sound this week. But do you hear God's voice? I live a busy life, and all I've got is a wife and a cat. I don't have children running around taking me place to place, right? I got a cat who's spoiled. But I live a busy life. And so I know that you with children and grandchildren running from game to game, running from choir practice to piano practice to this to that, you have a busy life. But we need to make sure we're not getting too busy to where we aren't hearing the voice of the Good Shepherd. Because ultimately God is going to call us to something. He has a purpose for each and every one of us here today. But if we're not hearing His voice, we're missing out. So this week I want to encourage you to find time. Tell your kids to go away. Tell your kids you need an hour by yourself. Tell your kids you need 10 minutes. Let them eat SpaghettiOs from the can for dinner maybe. Find time this week to listen to the voice. Maybe it's your husband. Tell your husband you need some time by yourself. Tell him to eat SpaghettiOs from the can. But this week, seriously, I know you're busy. Find 5 minutes, 10 minutes, 30 minutes to have some quiet time and listen for God's voice. Stay awake, but listen for God's voice, because God has a special purpose for all of us. And unless we hear the voice of the Good Shepherd, we'll never discover what that purpose is. Let's pray. Lord, you are good, and we know that. You're the Good Shepherd. You're the gate. You guide us into salvation. And so, Lord, I thank you for that. I thank you for being our God. I thank you for having special purposes for each and every one of us. Lord, allow us to slow our lives down and turn focus to you and to hear that voice. Just allow us to hear you. Pray this in your name. Amen.